I'm so grateful, Raymond, that you said what you did say about Michael. I want to add my own word of thanks for his great and wise ministry amongst us. I've seen him work as an area dean, and I've seen him work as a hospice chaplain, and both those things have been stunning, so we do thank you. My task, the agenda committee had this strange fantasy that if we held back my address to the end, you might not go home. And I've seen some people going out, to be honest. I'm sure they had weddings and stuff like that. And my task is to try and kind of process something of what Professor Davey said to us in terms of, why would we get somebody like Professor Davey to come and kind of sketch the backdrop to the whole issue of making disciples? And the answer to that is, it is not unhelpful if you want to take people on a journey to know where they've come from. And immediately, I know you picked up on this, immediately, what's happened in my lifetime is that, roughly speaking, the multiplicity and diversity of people's journeys is so hugely different. Back in the day, when we used to talk about mission, particularly overseas missionaries talked about this, they would talk about the whole idea of, first of all, understanding the culture, and they would use the phrase, the culture. Immediately that is redundant language, because most of you are ministering into a plethora of different subcultures. They talk about understanding the culture, then engaging with the culture, and by that, what they meant was that they would seek to try and put scriptural truth in a way that people could hear it and relate to it. I think we had a little bit of that when we had our panel up on the stage here. How do you speak to people who don't have the basic language of traditional religion? And having engaged with it, then what the missionaries would have told us was, you challenge it. What are the cultural aspects of any particular group that actually need some questions asking about them? And one of the things that struck me listening to Professor Davey is, I just wonder sometimes if we slightly shortchange the whole and complicated area of trying to really understand the people that we are ministering to. It's pretty clear to me that what I was taught about enculturization, as they used to call it, when I was in college years ago, is completely inappropriate for the world in which one of the difficult things, I think, for people in my age is we are aware of this world, but actually, in my job, I don't inhabit a lot of that world. And I suppose that great missionary guy who was the vicar of Chalfont St. Peter for a while, Roland, can somebody remember his surname? Say it again. Roland Allen. Yeah. One of the things he would say is, if you want to reach into the culture that God has given you to serve and to save, and again, he would have used the singular culture, but he would say, what you don't do is you don't train people professionally miles away from where they're going to end up ministering. You get them to do part of their learning in the culture which they feel called to minister to. So my first thought was, listening to Grace, was, oh gosh, I think we need to make, if we're going to make disciples, we need to make some kind of reinvestment in truly getting to the bottom of who is it we're ministering to? What's their thought world? What are the things that they talk about? What are the things that are important to them? And those of you who have a strong understanding of the authority of Scripture, which is many of you and me, is so how do we then put, if I might borrow Garrison Keeler, How do we put the hay of biblical truth where the goats can get it? It seems to me to be a massive issue for us. And so often I think we're talking into a kind of void of our own making because we just don't get stuff. The second thing is, how do we handle in this world where increasingly the new orthodoxy is very easily offended? I was staggered recently. I'm asked to go and speak to the Christian Union in Ewey. And on the morning I was supposed to go, it would have been easier if it had been a fortnight before, to be honest. On the morning I was about to go, I got 5 A4 pages telling me what I could and couldn't say. And interestingly, it started out with something I think everybody in this room would think would be a very good thing, and that is a commitment to free speech. And then the next 9 bullet points kind of deeply undermine the whole idea. Sorry, I'll keep still. Undermine the whole idea of free speech. You're not allowed to say anything that offends anybody. What does that mean? When you've got people like St. Paul writing about the essential gospel in his understanding as something that was a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Greeks. I wouldn't necessarily want to be widely quoted on this, but honestly, I don't mind offending atheists. I wouldn't go out of my way to do it, though sometimes the good I would do, I end up not doing. But at the end of the day, there are just some people I have to agree to disagree with. And I'm happy to disagree with atheists. It used to disturb me when, I listened to Professor Dawkins saying that having written The God Delusion, which was a fairly thin deconstruction of the Christian faith in my view, his thing that, I've said all this, I hated if the Church of England, kind of dematerialised. And part of me thinks, actually, I want people like him not to like us that much. What it sounds like is he thinks we're a tiger without any teeth. So interested in this whole issue of how we do what we do in the context of a world which seems to be increasingly easily offended. And I think those of you who are students of social media, I particularly claim to be myself, but you can very easily pick up on how readily offended people will be. The third thing that struck me that Professor Davies said, which we need to think about, is what is the psychological impact on people who have been through relentless and quite huge changes throughout the whole of their life, which is us and the generations beneath us. You remember the Tofflers, Heidi and Alvin, writing about the impact of continuous change on the human psyche. One of their conclusions was people become neurotic. And it's difficult to look at our culture and not see a kind of level of neuroticism. Since 2007, what's called by kind of technology geeks the information flow. The information flow since 2007 has gained in the amount of information that's out there by 45 times, and is due in the next, till between now and 2023 years, is going to change 9 times more. It is hard to believe, and I think you can see signs of this, that in this world of huge information flows, the great danger is that actually what you do is you inform people, and then actually the danger is you end up leaving them confused. What does the Christian faith have to say in the face of confusion? Grace made a big thing of the middle ground. Immediately I was thinking, we're cool on that, via media and all that kind. It's actually not what she's talking about, of course. She is talking about is the kind of direction of political narrative in the last 15 years, which is largely gathered around the centre. And what she's saying is that where people are gathering around the centre, Religion seems to be less and less of an influence. That's what secularization is, the process of secularization is all about. What are the ramifications for us and the way we've thought about our mission in a culture which is increasingly religiously illiterate? It doesn't know the basic. I remember, this is probably 10 years ago now, I went to a school and I'd been asked to do assembly, and I could tell the head teacher was in a bit of a stress about me being there. And in the end she came clear and said, well, I hope it goes well. Thank you. She said, yeah, you're not going to pray with them, are you? I said, I am a bishop, right? So she said, yeah, okay, what I mean is you're not going to say the Lord's Prayer with them. It's at a church school. I said, oh, does that offend you? She said, no, they don't know it. And, that's just a small example of, I'm always amazed looking at, for instance, atheist websites. What's interesting is, what they knock down on those websites is a view of us which has very, very little bearing in reality. I know very few, certainly Church of England schools, where they teach that God made the world in 6 days and then took a day off. Yet on the atheist websites, they're caning us all the time for teaching a non-scientific, non-rationalist view of the way the world was created. I think we have to think some more about how we do our mission, where less and less people have got the language that we speak, or the understanding of basic concepts that we have. The stuff about people movement that Grace talked about, I think, is fascinating for us, as some of you will be familiar with the missiologist Andrew Wall. And Andrew Wall writes books which basically says it would be nice to think that world missionary movements were, great heroes of the missionary faith, China Inland Ministry, Africa Inland, and all that. He says, no, the real truth of the spread of the gospel is people movements. And if you want to understand the way that works, is one of the things you've got to do is understand people movement. And one of our colleagues, I think, did his MA thesis on the whole thing. This was a clergy person ministering in Bristol. What's happened to people movement in the city of Bristol? What suburbs are being gentrified? And part of the reason he wanted to kind of get at that was that one of the things we do know about the Church of England, that if it is to do well with its local mission, it tends to do well in suburbs that are being gentrified. That may be saying something very negative about us, but it is a fact. So if you looked at people movements, that might give you a clue about future deployment. It might not. I thought she was questioning of the future of parochial ministry as we know it. Do you remember one of the things she said early on is, which I immediately pricked up my ears, because it's been my sort of slightly uncertain and not quite know how to handle it view. The problem, don't get me wrong, we're committed to parochial ministry, but it is a very expensive way of delivering ministry, and somewhere, at some stage, at some time, not me, you, not me, you are going to have to do some more thinking about, if we believe this is a good way, which I think we do, a very good way of delivering our ministry, how are we going to make that affordable into the future? And we know this, all charities find this a massive problem, but one of the things, having been on the boards of loads of charities, one of the things I can tell you is, a lot of charities find it very difficult to look at their cost line. Very happy to look at their income line and fantasize about it, but looking at their cost line is more of a painful thing. So I think that I'm hopeful that we're agreed that the parochial system, despite the fact that boundaries were drawn years ago, we can make some adjustments to that, is an effective way of doing what I think most of you feel called to. But we're going to have to think in the course of you're going to have to think in the course of the next 10 years about, are there other models of delivery of this that actually will not require the levels of expenditure, which may or may not be untenable. I think the key thing in all of this is, and I think Grace was optimistic about this, is that I liked her phrase, the power of convening. I think that's probably right, and it may be for wrong reasons, but I think it's probably right that we can use our kind of, Dad's Army kind of church. Because I think a lot of people, again, not necessarily for good reasons, don't see us as a threat. As I think that can be leveraged, can convene, hopefully to bring people together, to work out how do we make this place better. Now, nobody believes more than me that I think the way the world becomes a better place is largely a life at a time when people get the gospel. But actually that doesn't mean we can't convene people to discuss these significant issues that are around us. And I think Grace is right. We still have power to do that. The issue is, do we have the intent to do that, and do we have the capacity to do that? And my general experience of you is to answer yes to both those questions. She seemed optimistic around the truth that we still have a hope of being part of the conversation. Conversation which is vastly diverse, fascinatingly complex. But I think I don't know if I need to believe this or whether I truly believe it, but certainly I think we need to believe that we still have a contribution to be made to that conversation. And this is not just a commentary necessarily on the General Synod meeting that we just had, that we talked about earlier. But and not at all telling anybody what they should think about anything. But I think it is pretty clear to me, and seemed to be clear when whoever it was quoted from Rowan Williams earlier, I think it was Martin, that before we surrender the unity of the church, we should think very carefully. And right now, one sees American society divided very bitterly around the election of their president. In our country, we see a lot of bitter stuff around, and a lot of unhealthy stuff around the referendum result to pursue a Brexit. A lot of feeling about that within our churches, although generally I would say I've experienced most people in our churches as people who voted to remain. But there are plenty of people who didn't vote to remain, and presumably some of them are either not owning up or I don't meet them that often. But look, in the immediate aftermath of the Synod vote, I thought it was important for the Dean and I, who are known to represent different shades of opinion around, to put out some statement, which, okay, wasn't massively detailed or anything, it was an attempt to say that we at least are committed to being together to see what will happen. Who knows what will happen? There may be a major realignment, there may not be. But I think our job becomes more difficult if we get into the language and the practice of realignment in a world which seems divided, and in a world which, if I'm right that it is divided, is probably not going to be as helped as it could be by a church which is divided. So we need to pray, as Paul would have encouraged us, to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. I think we've had a great input from Grace, and I hope it's made you think, as it's made me think. It certainly made me think that what we can't do is respond to religious illiteracy by kind of dumbing down the whole thing. My view is that a missionary church needs more theology, not less, and that's down to us to get right. But I'm grateful to all of you for lasting the course. I hope you were stimulated and interested by what Professor Davey had to say. And I take a quiet pride in saying this. I look forward to seeing how you all